me if you see everything. My computer is slow, so be patient with me. Okay, here we go. Okay. Now, do you see my keynote? No.
Not yet. It might take a second though. Let's just give it.
Cool. Yeah, let me know because it shows on my screen.
So something's shaking. Here we go.
I see it.
All right.
You see? Yay! Cool. Okay, so Kako, when you invited me, you said that the topic of this conversation is like the role of technology in shaping creative practices, and I just thought that it's so broad, so I'll just talk about my practice and how the technology and especially blockchain shaped my personal practice. So I'll give a little intro into what I've been up to before I became a curator at LMLA, and then I'll have a couple case studies and the artists I work with to share with you that I'm like really inspired of. Okay, so the project before the pandemic, together with like 5 artists from all over, we created this project called Human Island, and that was really interesting because NFT, I didn't use it as a tool at that time. I didn't know nothing about it, so we were just like playing around. And if somebody is interested in that, you can go online, and the project is still active, called posthumanisland.com. So I was really curious about the questions. What is today's internet blindly willing upon the human mind of tomorrow? What kind of mental health issues might exist for future beings? What kind of human rights does posthuman have? What about AI? That changed a lot. And what kind of boundaries we should have as a future society, if any? And I'll play a little intro of the project, and then I'll continue to... Let me know if you hear the sound.
Welcome to Posthuman Island, the first cohabitation of posthumans. My name is Alicia60. I am a 7-year-old second-gen neo-bi-solutions being. I'm happy to be your guide. Posthuman Island is the birthplace of over 5 humans who have helped adapt into their most organic posthuman selves. We study their changes to learn about what might help humanity. We also boast the most reliable network connection on the planet, even through the Great Crash. This paradise is all thanks to Dr. Trust, the founder and CEO of No-Buy Solutions. No-Buy Solutions. Trust Dr. Trust.
I trust.
So this is the experience that we created during the pandemic with 5 amazing artists about whom I'm going to talk about. But before that, I forgot to say that I'm really interested in like speculative narrative and world building and kind of gamified experience, and how this all can work with a like serious topic like biopolitics and embodiment psychology. So together with 5 artists, as I mentioned, we created 5 future humans. All of them like have their bios, and all of them like have their own environment and live in this island that you just saw. So together with the artists, we were like fantasizing how those humans can look like. And first one is like Specimen, that's created by Chicago-based artist Chris Collins. And we were fantasizing that this specimen was like in the past, he was kind of engaged with tardigrade, so he like evolved in this by the influence of AI with the tardigrade as a tardigrade. And I'll play this short video also to give you a little bit intro.
Focus on the sound of my voice. Let the vibrations wash over you like cool water. Take a breath. Hold it within. Treasure its fleeting beauty. Then give this gift away. Set it free. yourself growing larger, stronger, more powerful.
I really love this project because, first of all, I never saw anything like that, and I'm excited that we were able to create absolutely wild creatures and like use all the imagination. And that's interesting that it's always done before. You know, the NFT came and blockchain came into my world, and just really quickly, basically, we have like 5 different creatures on this island, and I work with each artist to like navigate the world for those creatures, and each creature has like a little bio, audio diary, previous occupation. This is artwork by Huntress, my good friend and amazing artist who based in LA as well. And this one is USB red. So why I'm showing all of this is because it was interesting to be in a digital art world for the last 5 years before it became, you know, mainstream, and now everybody can like at least understand what digital art means, not just like in the tight circles. And what is interesting also, when we released the project, we had like 0 chances to monetize it. And first of all, it's really artistic, and it was all around like festivals or screenings, but you're never able to like sell anything. And I'm moving to my next chapter, which is called like NFT gallery. And I remember I'm Ukrainian, so during the pandemic I was in Ukraine, and I saw this gallery pop up called Velum, which is my home right now. And I was really excited because Los Angeles really lacking digital art space, and the space where you can like get together with the community and like talk about like how technology influence creative practices. So in this thing, it was because like really interesting to talk about this crypto art curation different than digital art curation. And I think this I've got those questions so many times, and it's a rhetorical question, I guess, because crypto and like NFT is just a tool, and the way how you create digital art is like exactly how you create, I guess, crypto art in some way. In some ways it's different, but what I want to talk today about is that every new technology wave brings a new form of community, and how, you know, like 100 years ago, like where Black Square was like sold by Malevich, and it was like oil and canvas, the merge by Pat was in 2021, was sold as NFT. And it's interesting how, you know, see this parallel, how like between like Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3. And I read today a lot while preparing for this talk how actually technology changed the society. And I made this like little note that like Web 1 was like about reading, Web 2 was about reading and writing, Web 3 is about reading, writing, and owning. But the main question is that what's going to be Web 4, because even right now, talking about Web 3, I am of course excited about it, and I'm excited what kind of opportunities it brought to the artist, and including myself, how it changed my practice. That right now, when I saw the first sales of the artists I've been working with for 5 years, you know, and that brought me a lot of joy. But right now, the big NFT platforms are actually starting to act like the major tech players, you know, kind of trying to get more money, OpenSea canceled royalties, and etc., etc. So today I'm really interested actually in a collective empathy, and I have couple case studies, and one of them is the artist we work with at Velum. Her name is Lauren Lee McCarthy, and I think her work is really great example how technology can benefit the artist, how blockchain can give artists so much possibilities. And I want to briefly talk about project Good Morning, Good Night, and Sleepover. At Velum, we show Good Morning and Sleepover. So basically, if you're not familiar with Lauren Lauren's practice. She's really interested in relationship with people who are like involved in her practice and who buying work from her or like collecting work from her. So with the good morning, if you collect the work, you need to update the browser every single day, otherwise the work is gonna die. And it was really funny to get the emails how somebody forgot to update the browser and the work died, and people like, oh my god, I lost my work, can I like collect one more? But it was only 28 editions, so it was funny to observe how artists getting the ownership back from the collectors, and collectors kind of have to do something finally. With the Goodnight piece, which is 1-on-1 edition, Lauren was texting goodnight to the owner of the piece, and this piece is still active. I believe like it's been a couple of years already. The person who collected the piece from her was able to get goodnight messages every night. And Sleepover is probably my favorite piece because it's so hilarious and so interesting how the artist can be creative within blockchain. Of course, not only with blockchain, but we're talking today about technology, so I guess I love this example. Sleepover is the piece when Lauren basically was offering to sleep in your front or backyard if you will collect the piece. And she would come with her sleeping bag as she was coming during the pandemic to like sleeping in the front yard of the friends. So the person who will collect the piece will like get Lauren to sleep, but you're not allowed to talk. You just know that somebody is like next to you and like spending time with you tonight, which I think is really funny and great example of how the art can be like interactive with the collectors and how it can be really engaging and ridiculous in some way and touching topics of privacy. And just thinking about how long the work will live in the good morning and good night case, like how many times people gonna update the browser, what if they're gonna be updating it until the end of their life, what's gonna happen when they're gonna die, will somebody else will update the browser for them. So I think in terms of that, these questions are really interesting, how technology affecting the artistic practice, because it can like push it to the limit. Second case study is with my amazing friends in Berlin based on Cross-Lucid, and it's called Sentient Sigil. Basically, Cross-Lucid trained the software, and I've got the sigil as well. I believe this is mine. You need to give them your message. Obviously, like manifest, and mine was like peace for Ukraine, and they giving you the visual back. And they just, I believe, like more than 100 collectors and museum workers and curators, and basically distributed sigils for them, like their own talisman or the protection. And this sigil became like viral. People started posting that, all the art community, and then all the sigils were like all around the field. But what was interesting then, that we did the fundraiser, and everybody who owned the sigil was able to collect the sigil, and all the proceeds would go to Ukraine, to the civilians who were affected by Russian war in Ukraine. And I think that's also amazing how with the technology, how blockchain allows you to bring the fundraiser on an absolutely different level. And yeah, this is the gallery I work with called Vellum. This is our front yard with this big billboard, and it was, amazing to see how this virtual experience or virtual collective turns into actual help for the actual society. And speaking about fundraisers and technology and my practice, the exhibition that I curated half of a year ago called Hotel Blue was also a home for the virtual beings, or like the future beings of tomorrow. And I'll play just a quick video about this exhibition, how online collective and how technology will bring people offline. And And so basically, when Russia just invaded Ukraine, I was thinking how I can be how can I respond to that, and my practice is more connected to post-human bodies, potential future adaptations, and very futuristic topics. And I asked artists to reflect what means home to them, as I mentioned already. And it was beautiful to see that the work was really, really futuristic, but the meaning of this work was really close to topic of Ukraine. And some artists portray Paula Pina, she portrayed the virtual beings with the little creature in her hands, you can see on the screen, and basically dedicated to all mothers. Excuse me? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm wrapping up. How Paula Pina portrayed this creature in her hands, dedicated this art piece to all the mothers who were losing their children, and it was so metaphorical and poetic and painful at the same time. And we were able to collect the money, and I think that was my first time doing fundraising with crypto art and crypto money, and it worked, and we sent it to Nova Ukraine organization, and it was amazing to see how you can actually transform this online community experience into actual work in progress and helping the actual society. And I would love to finish actually with Ukrainian artist Chris Kor, who based in Lviv, really close to my hometown. I asked her how the technology shaped her creative practice. And she said, I finally found the biggest purpose for myself to start making NFTs. My 7 days of war became my first personal conscious NFT minted on Foundation in order to support refugees, local volunteers, and Ukraine DAO. This artwork became a shootout to the world and the quintessence of my feelings that day. And that was amazing just to see how the technology allows artists who work with digital art for a long time to be able to influence them and be able to transform into the action. I'll just play you her work. Just a couple seconds. It says glory to heroes and glory to Ukraine. And to resume my presentation, I think it was a great journey for this. I've been working with Velo Malay for 2 years already, and I've curated around 6 exhibitions there and produced maybe 22 exhibitions. It was a great journey with 100 artists, and it was incredible to observe what technology can bring to everybody's life. And right now working with AI, and I think it's the whole next topic we can think about that I didn't touch in my presentation, but I guess it's really exciting and terrifying at the same time. And I'll finish on this. Feel free to jump in.
Thank you for that, Alice. That was fantastic. Giving us a lot to think about. Keeping this rolling so we have enough good amount of time for the conversation at the end. I'm going to introduce our second speaker. They are the author of the book Blockchain Chicken Farm and Other Stories of Tech in China's Countryside. Please help me in welcoming Xioawei Wang.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be on this panel with you as well, Alice, and thank you, Kako, for bringing us together. So I don't really have a title for my presentation, but I think the guiding words I've been thinking about recently a lot, are these ideas of intimacy, impossibility, desire, impossible images, and models, specifically models in the context of AI, but also just more broadly, the ways that we're thinking about models as a philosophical concept and how that shapes AI. So I guess my work is kind of in these my creative practice is in these two realms. One, I write, and the other, I make digital media work. And as a writer, I really think a lot about the materiality of tech. And so I think about, just the hardware, the energy, the land, all the things that make these computers and screens that we're on possible, or even just like the transmittal of one packet from another, from one place to another. And so you can think about this. This is actually an image throughout research for Blockchain Chicken Farm, where it's these women who are in Shenzhen, which is like 90% of the world's electronics are produced there, and they are packing up these like electronics to be shipped out all over the place. For the book, I also looked at, blockchain chickens. So these chickens that had Fitbits attached to their legs. It was for a food safety project, essentially. And it was really fascinating to see the ways that this technology was being used in farming. But also how things like e-commerce are really also changing the livelihood of people in the countryside, right? And so for me, it was against this bigger context of climate change, and 20% of greenhouse gas emissions comes from industrialized agriculture. And so you have a lot of people who used to be small farmers, and instead they're giving up their land to these bigger places, like these big agricultural corporations. And so they're trying to find like new ways of making a livelihood, and that includes manufacturing things to put onto e-commerce websites. And another story that I talk about in the book is AI farming pigs, basically the use of AI in industrial agriculture, which is pretty terrifying. And I don't know if y'all have read kind of Ted Chiang's recent articles in the New Yorker about AI, but kind of compares AI to McKinsey, and how it's like about optimizing things. And so that's very much the case. And so really thinking about land, algorithmic trading of like corn futures, which affects how much farmers decide to plant of corn. These complex dynamics that are really shaped and produced as a result of the technologies that we have today. And when I say technology, it's really like this network of people who are making the technology, the venture capitalists who are funding this, the money and the political will that goes into these big tech companies, right? And so that's kind of one bucket of my work. And for a long time, I worked in tech, and I kind of felt like being on the inside, which felt really important for me just to have as an experience, because I always think about it as like, I don't want to be writing love letters to power. I kind of want to see like, what is that like, right? Like, what is the kind of boring daily lunch that you get as a tech worker, and kind of the ways that you think you're working on something that's like for good, but actually you're just getting like these little tickets parceled out to you that you have to like fix in the code, and what happens. So to the other side of work, I've really been thinking about intimacy and models lately. And so in AI, so much hinges on the model that you're working with. Training models, using data. It's also really tied into kind of like speculation, right? So a lot of like kind of out of the box AI models, if you've worked with them before, they've already been pre-trained on lots of data, and so they have this predictive capacity. And I find this notion of predictive capacity really fascinating, because this is like the futures cone. So futurists often use this to like think about the future, but you also can think about it as this kind of archaeology of the past and memory, right? And so, recently, a friend of mine was like, hey, can I make you a synthetic voice? And I was like, sure. And so he scraped all this data. He used this like, pre-trained generative AI model to generate a synthetic voice for me. And one thing he said was he noticed that on the graph plots, he was like, oh, I found these clusters where it's like the voice memo voice of you, the like, you know, public talk voice, the academic voice, the like all these different Xioawei voices. And I found that really fascinating, right? That the model kind of like has to abstract and flatten in these ways and kind of find the average. And it's less about locating the real me, but more something that I find fascinating about things like, you know, models, modeling the future, models for prediction, models in AI. That's really about, you know, the distance between the present and our experience of the world. When I was interviewing this neuroscientist once, he said memory is the act of constantly forgetting. And it's like when you're in the present, there's millions of things that as humans we sense, but we can't remember, because it would literally be like everything everywhere all at once. Like we would just, you know, our brains could not handle it. So to me, models are kind of about this desire and the distance between knowing and not knowing, and it's kind of like, you know, falling in love in a way, right? It's about this like distance between the model and the present. And so I've been working a lot with these archives, and so I don't know if you can hear the sound, but this is a video that I made shot under a microscope, and it is taking seeds and flowers and plants from this farm that's located in Northern California. And the farmer actually started this farm because his ancestors, he was thinking a lot about the alien land laws in California. So I won't play the whole video. I can share the link later on if someone wants to see it. But basically, the alien land laws, as I started to discover, were a series of laws enacted in California that prevented basically any non-US born person from actually owning land. And this was a measure, at least on the West Coast, of kind of anti-Asian sentiment. And a lot of these workers, so here you see them, they were actually formerly plantation workers from Hawaii who, after they finished out their indentured servitude contract, they moved to California in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so this body of work that's still in progress, it basically takes the archive and archival imagery, and using PyTorch and kind of this generative model, takes archival images alongside existing botanical prints, and uses them to generate a speculative botany. I always hesitate to say AI, and I always say it's like algorithmically generated speculative botany, because I think there's so much like kind of power to that AI term, right? And I want to be really careful about what we mean by it. So you can kind of get a sense of like how the speculative botany emerges. The botanical prints that I use for this body of work is a series of William Morris prints, which I will talk about in a second. I think to me it's really about creating this kind of intimate geography. I think about, you know, in this process and in this work, this kind of ancient twisted karma, right? You know, you have like this kind of universalizing of models, the work that models do, and the abstract, and then the kind of things that cannot be universalized, right? I've been really fascinated by the concept of the body inch, which in Chinese medicine, everyone has a different body inch. It's like not an absolute. It's literally the width of your thumb, and that's how they do acupuncture. It's like not like measuring, you know, this is like, you know, your ear is supposed to be 5 inches or whatever. And then this kind of very relative measurement against the very rationalized measurement of the fields that many of these plantation workers in Hawaii worked in, right? Like it was very kind of mechanized at a certain point. Agriculture, the fields had to be planted a certain size, they had to be a certain width to allow for machinery to go through, and it's just these two kind of different logics playing against each other. And so throughout the process of researching, a lot of these plantation workers who came from the Philippines, Japan, China, all across Asia, and they were sent to Hawaii to work, I really became fascinated by their clothing as well, which is actually stored at the Japanese American National Museum in LA. And I was just so taken in by how this clothing was really constructed for them. Like it wasn't cut out via pattern. It wasn't this kind of like absolute measurements. It was really like people putting the clothing against each other's backs and cutting this clothing to a shape. And this is an image of an apron. So all of this was work clothing, an apron that one of the workers wore. And so I felt like, okay, there's botanical prints. I've seen it before. And of course it became really common actually from William Morris arts and crafts movement at the end of the 1800s, the Victorian era. And, you know, this kind of, I found it really kind of perverse, this violence of beauty, right? Like you see this kind of beauty of the botanical print, and then when you look closely and you read more into William Morris history, it's really like he's basing a lot of his illustrations of this botany off of, you know, essentially like botanical imperialism, right? So like a lot of the people who were at Kew Royal Gardens, they would go out and collect like specimens across Asia, Africa, Latin America, and take these and take it back to Kew. And, you know, so William Morris was like able to create these beautiful, exotic botanical prints, essentially because of the British Empire. And these botanical prints, they were connected to botanical illustrations, and they are a model in a different way too, which was really fascinating. In botanical illustrations, essentially, when you see them, they're often drawn as like this perfect botanical specimen, and so you get like the leaf from spring, the flower from, you know, summer, you might get a seed from fall. So it's all these different seasons that exist into one illustration, and it's really the model of the perfect specimen, but it can't actually exist in physical reality in time. So with these themes, I started, you know, as I mentioned, combining this archival imagery with William Morris botanical prints that are existing, and then using this to generate the speculative botany. And so through a lot of like different tweaking and different rounds of experimentation, coming up with this like new botanical, I see it as like this botanical language. So here are some of the, basically the archival image, the generated pattern, and then the new the new speculative plant next to it. You can see here, there's an archival image of a rubber tree plantation in Borneo, Indonesia. So a lot of these archival images, black and white images, are from like the Kew Gardens botanical archives. So they're all British colonial plantations. And so yeah, I think it's been a key part of this work, is really this kind of use of speculation into the past. It's kind of this like archaeology is also a speculative way of practice. So yeah, and I've been turning this, you know, I think thinking a lot about bodies and relative measurements, turning this into printed fabric, as well as experimenting with it as paper flowers. And I really love this kind of, like I said, this perversity of something that looks beautiful, but is actually like, you know, speaking to this kind of really twisted history. And also the perversity of taking something that's like a digital, algorithmically generated thing and turning it into something material. And yeah, I've used a lot of this like botanical printed fabric as well to recreate some of the plantation workers' clothing. So that was kind of a whirlwind, and hopefully it all made sense. But yeah, I think I'll leave kind of on this idea of the model as like this kind of distance-based thing to really think about, you know, how we traverse time and the, you know, archaeology of the past using this kind of like technical method. So I'll end there. Thank you so much. I'll stop sharing, and I'm excited for our discussion.
Fantastic. Thank you, Xioawei. I'm going to step out of the way, and because I'm curious about what you all have to say about each other's work, a practice, a process, all of the above. So, yeah, like, do your thing.
So I think, do you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the presentation. That's, first of all, I think it's a great dive into your practice, and I haven't seen that anyone would use it, you know, like combining the historical sad events with this beauty, and also, yeah, it's like a lot of layers inside of your practice that I think worth like talking about it more, at least for an hour, you know.
Aw, well, I was really excited by what you said in your presentation earlier about different modes of technology creating new types of community. And also I know that you two, like you have your own creative practice that we didn't get to in the presentation. But yeah, just like how you're thinking about that, and then also, you know, the artist as a kind of community builder as well.
Definitely, I think that's what I was thinking recently, because I keep like people keep inviting me to like, oh, role of the curator in the space, or role of the artist, and the more I think about it every time when I'm preparing, I'm actually that we don't need any more, you know, just like dictators or people who will tell us what to do or like how to do it, like it was in the past by curators or galleries. You know, we need more community builders and people who are actually like organizing and serving the community. And that was really exciting for me, like be a part of Vellum and also a part of like LA art scene. I started thinking, because we've got so many proposals to like expand Vellum and do Vellum Berlin or like Vellum New York. And I thought about this thing that people don't actually live globally, they live locally. And the more you will invest in like local community and like local relationships, the more everybody will benefit. And then you can have like international community online also.
Yeah, I feel like what you just said really resonates for me, because I feel like one thing I think about a lot in my work, and I think to the question about like speculating into the past using technology, it's like we always think of the internet as really abstract, or like tech as like, oh yeah, like digital nomad, whatever. But I love what you just said about place, because it's like, even though like we can be connected to many artists in different places, it's also like literally the community and place-based movements and spaces that we have are like very vital, because they're so connected to like, you know, our local economy is like our local conditions. I feel like the pieces you showed, I mean, they're responding to like the real, you know, crisis and environment like in Ukraine right now. And I think that's just so much like more powerful than like the myth of abstract. Yeah,
definitely. And I'm thinking a lot actually about everything community building related, because I am going through immigration process right now, and it's interesting to be in the country that like built for like individualism, like capitalism and everything, to like you need to benefit yourself from that, and like everybody should be kind of isolated, especially in Los Angeles. But I organized this fundraiser for my immigration process, and I just realized that like without the community it wouldn't be possible, and it was interesting to see how people like supported, and the people that you build the relationship with online. Some people that I've been friends online only, we never saw each other, like supported my fundraiser. I think it was really empowering for me and amazing to see how actually, because I've been reading a lot about Web 2 today, how, because the term Web 2 like appeared in like 2004 or like 2001 or something. It's like 20 years ago or something. And it was just only about like people like sharing things and doing something. But right now I feel like people started like taking responsibilities and like more like caring. Like right now we're in the era of caring, hopefully, and just thinking about like inclusivity. And I wonder what is in your practice, what do you think, how it's connected maybe with your roots or maybe like with your local community? How is your practice actually connected to that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like care and community and also this question, like, it's so, I feel like I don't know, when I was looking at this history of the plantation workers, it was like really visceral because it was connected to this farm in Northern California and the alien land laws and this kind of anti-Asian sentiments in California historically. And at the same time, like the more I learned about these plantation workers, I was like, no, there's also just like like the Japanese plantation workers in Hawaii, they had like songs, they had this clothing, they had like their own just like ways of like celebrating and like joyfulness. And I think that was something that really stuck with me, was just like, even though there's this kind of history of work and subjugation in Hawaii of these indentured workers, they also had like, I mean, essentially art, right? To really like keep the community together. And so I thought that was really incredible. And to that question of care, then, I don't know, I feel like it's so complicated, right? I feel like care, it's like it only emerges, I think, in a very vivid way in times of rupture and crisis. And so then when there's not rupture and crisis, like care becomes very invisible and we don't celebrate it, which is really sad to me. Yeah, I don't know.
Definitely, I think you're right. I think unless and even more sometimes when something happens like pandemic, right? It only shows how people like don't care about each other and like just care about themselves. And I don't know, the idea of care, we should definitely talk about it more inside of the online community, especially like with blockchain, and a lot of like anonymous. It can be also a lot of racism and like nasty things going on. So yeah. Kathy, do you want to jump in? Do you have any questions for us, or you didn't prepare for tonight?
I've got questions, but I don't want to hog the space because I'm having a lot of fun just listening to both of y'all. Because it's interesting, this like relationship between technology and how it manifests itself in like the physical space, and both of y'all touched on it independently, and I think it's like should we be thinking about these virtual spaces and these physical spaces separately anymore? Because it sounds like they affect each other. Is there this like new like bubble cell that we should be thinking about with the relationship of like local physical spaces, but then how like faraway digital spaces then start to like affect like where we live? I don't know if that was a question, but
I've just like made my peace with the fact that I have students who are just like, yeah, there's no division. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to be called a boomer, so I'll just agree with them. But I don't know. Yeah, I'm curious for you, Alice. What do you think? Like, do you think that division is still there?
I think not more about the spaces, virtual and physical. I think more about our body because, like, what is the use of the body in a virtual space, and what is the use of the body in the future? Because right now, we don't really need our body to be like present on human bodies on the internet, but it's interesting how the body is not actually present virtually. And
should we have done this in VR instead? We could be like flying on a cloud, all of us.
Yeah, you know what is funny about like doing in VR instead of like doing in a kind of virtual space? All the spaces made like for the physical example, it's like a white cube, and you can like pick your avatar and clothes. There's like people don't like think about themselves anything as human.
Yeah.
And I think that's really funny how like everybody designed those spaces, metaverses, but they're like exact same thing. Like we see the spaces in real life, So why those boundaries are not pushed? Of course, there are people who like pushing the boundaries and like creating more opportunities. But I participated in some panel, and it was no option to be like a butterfly there, or like I don't know anything else but human. Moreover, sometimes even avatars don't even have like different skin type, like color skin type, which is really interesting to observe in 2023.
I know,
when
all
we talk
avatars
about inclusivity, and adaptation.
Yeah, I feel like it's this weird thing where I always think of how in Buddhism it's just like being a human is intrinsically about suffering, and so I'm just like, yes, like I would rather be a butterfly. Like, please make that happen. But I agree, like especially too with some of the early like metaverse stuff, like you see like Mark Zuckerberg's like literal VR avatar, and it's just him, and he's like wandering around and with no legs, being like really weird and problematic and offensive, and I'm just like, no. Like, I think if we can only be like butterflies and other insects in the metaverse, maybe that would be like a really interesting social experiment.
And so I guess to tack on to that question, so like what does that then do for identity? When it's like, we're all a little bit of an avatar in our representations of ourselves, and like the model of ourselves that we project. Like, I guess it's a question of like is there a reason to talk about physical and digital like separately? Like we do exist like physically and digitally in our representations. Like even just hanging out with different people, you code switch your language, and there's not really a difference. It's like the context is just is like now it's like virtual. Like
yeah, I mean, so I guess my boring answer is that I think in like the late 1990s, early 2000s, this was like a really big question, right? Like a lot of like cyber feminists, like Lisa Nakamura, Wendy Chun have written about this, and that kind of like, oh, on the internet, no one knows you're a dog kind of thing, right? And it's this like dream of this like global utopia that would happen. And I think even though there's not this kind of strict division between online and offline now, I think, what you were saying earlier about like those impacts, like those are still real. Like, there's still the very material, structural, societal, like systems that we live under. Like, like at least like we're still in the US, we're in LA, like we live in this like super like fucked up country. Oh, sorry, I just swore. But like I think that like I think it is a utopia to be like we can all just escape into the online, mess, but I think like we're still going to be bound by our material circumstances.
Yeah, you still gotta drink water. And then at the end of the day, it's like these models are defined like who's benefiting from like these definitions from the models that are being presented as reality.
Definitely. Speaking of cyber feminine.
Yes, everyone needs to get that book. It's so good.
Everyone needs to get this book. It's so good. Yeah, but I also think digital, physical, tangible. I think it's such, as you mentioned, so it's such an old question, And I wonder if just because of our generation, we still like ask that because I personally was born during Soviet Union. Soviet Union didn't even collapse at that time. So, and internet and sex, everything was like not there, And so we're gonna be asking those questions like, physical and digital for like 10 more years. But I'm sure the kids who are like living on TikTok or like VR chat, they don't ask those questions even anymore. It's just kind of all together as an experience. But yeah, and I love hanging with like younger generation than me, like 20 years younger or something, to see how this border is not a border anymore for some reason,
Yeah, it's constantly there as like a mediator, but also at the same time, I feel like with the younger generation and like my students, I'm like, okay, there's still this element of performance, like that, but you're not aware of it. Like you take it very seriously, but you're not aware, like exactly as you were saying, Kako, like you're performing, you're code switching, you're being different in different contexts, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, but so now I know why you presenting so great, Xioawei, because you're teaching. Are you teaching? Where do you teach?
I teach students geography, I guess in the expansive sense, and also how to think about tech critically. That gets really depressing.
Oh, I love the chat.
Yeah, this has been great. I always wish that these could go on for like another like 30 minutes or an hour, but alas, we're coming up on time. I want to also open it up to the chat and see if there are any questions from the audience. So I'm gonna Lydia is asking, Alice, what do you believe the next community from the next wave of technology might look like? And I think Xioawei should also respond to that because she might have some opinions.
That's a great question. Thank you, Lydia. Oh, I need to think about it. I actually was thinking about it today when I like wrote that like every technology wave bring a new community, and I wonder. It really depends. So what we allow technology to do and what we will be like, like growing, which manners we will be growing as. Because let's look at the past, right? We are still trying to build inclusive community, but every time new technology comes, like blockchain, all white male, VR, all white male, everything like dominated by male still in 2023, and then we need to onboard BIPOC artists, and it's kind of sad that we're still dealing with that we still like every time a new technology pops up, we like need to deal with like talk about inclusivity. So to be not that vague, I think answering the question, I hope that the new community that we're gonna build will be more inclusive. And I think to make it more inclusive, maybe we need to have some curriculum for the artists and curriculum how to navigate future art ecosystem and work on this right now.
I think to add to what Alice was just saying too, I think oftentimes when we think of tech, we think of like Facebook or metaverse or things like that, right? And it is very much a produced concept. Like we equate tech with like fancy, fast, innovation, optimized, generative AI. But I think it's really important for us now to think about technology as also ancestral technologies, as other technologies that people have been doing for thousands of years. There's this really great talk, I encourage you all to watch it, a panel talk with Saul Williams, the poet, speaking at Sundance, and he was like, drums were the original form of Wi-Fi technology, right, to communicate across distances. Like poetry and the spoken word, I mean, think of like the emotions it brings up to you in a way that can sometimes be more powerful than an Instagram post. Like that is a profound technology. And then my depressing answer is people will just manage friendships using generative AI, which was done to me recently, and I just had to share that.
I love both those answers. I mean, like, I didn't realize I started doing this, but I just started saying lol out loud now with the same face that I type it with. But all right, I'm moving on to the next question from Kevin Boyd. I'm really curious about, and I think this applies to both of you again, so feel free to both answer. I'm really curious about the monetization of your work moving forward. Do you see your projects integrating with other digital mediums such as the metaverse?
Xioawei, you go.
I'm an academic. I have chosen a path of lifelong austerity.
And struggle.
Yeah. Alice, what about you?
I think about all the time. I'm coming from a very experimental underground art like background, when everything is for art, nothing is for money. But actually working with the commercial gallery, or with just in general using commercial model and see how you can sell the work and how it benefits the artist is really inspiring for me. I wouldn't lie. I actually really, really happy, when we sell something at Vellum and we can transfer those funds to the artist and they can fund their next project, So I definitely hope that my work would be like monetized in the future. Either it's like a commission, or maybe it's going to be some new, I don't know, maybe it's going to be some new technology that will allow actually artists to monetize their work, because nobody was able to predict NFTs or something, and only because we use it poorly and how it was presented to the mass society in such a poor way. I feel it scared the artist. Instead of using that technology, artists were so late in it, and now even right now artists is joining NFTs, but the market is kind of slow. And as I mentioned in the previous, if we will have some curriculum, that's going to be easier, for us in the future. So yeah, I definitely want to monetize my work if possible. Hello, if anyone hears me. But I am next to the academia, field. I'm spending a lot of time with academia people, so I don't know if that's this curve, attached to me too.
I appreciate both of those answers. The candor, very, very nice to see. So I wanted to open it up, final thoughts from both of you. Curious if you have any questions for each other that haven't been addressed, and then let us know where we can follow what you're up to, and check out any updates on any current projects.
So I wonder, what are you working on right now, and maybe you have some upcoming exhibitions I can attend, or anyone can attend online or offline?
I'm trying to finish up Witch Fever, which I showed in the presentation, and then I think I might have a very short event around Witch Fever in LA at the end of October, but I'll probably post on Insta. And yeah, I'm curious for you, Alice, because I saw as someone who's been following your work and as a fan, I've seen the video that you recently made of the speculative worlds. And I'm wondering, what are you working on and where can we see your work soon?
Right now, I feel like curation and full-time job takes a lot of time, so I'm working right now. We didn't announce it yet, so it's kind of exclusive information. We're working on a Casey Reyes solo show. If you know Casey Reyes' work, it's going to be at Vellum, and it's really exciting. I'll be co-curating it with Jesse Damiani and Cinziana Valicescu, and it's supposed to happen October 5th, which is really soon.
Yay!
Yeah, so I hope you can make it. And yeah, I am actually really interested right now in performance, and I curated a couple performances recently that gives me a lot of joy and freedom in creating stuff besides the gallery world. Yeah.
Yay, I'm excited. I'm excited to see the show.
Well, thanks again for coming and sharing, dropping all of this knowledge. Last week, one of the speakers taught us a new word called scrying, where it's you're just getting inspired by what you're hearing and your brain is buzzing. I learned so much from